Hi, and welcome to Check Your Thread, a podcast about sewing more sustainably. My name's Zoe, and I'm obsessed with sewing. I've been blogging about it for over 13 years and am the creator and host of the popular handmade wardrobe challenge, Me Made May. But like many people, I've become increasingly concerned about the climate crisis and the way my lifestyle contributes to it. So in this podcast, I'll be nerding out about making clothes whilst exploring how to minimise the negative impact that it may have. I really hope you'll join me on this journey. Hi, lovely listeners. Thanks for tuning in. I hope that you are doing very well. It's been a really mixed week for me since the last episode. I continued to isolate with my daughter through her suspected COVID situation. She's completely fine now, touch wood, and back at school. Then mercifully, after a week trapped indoors, I got to spend an entire day outside my home attending a workshop, which I'll come on to in a little bit. Sewing-wise, I've been busting through my mending pile. I've fixed a couple of splits in my son's padded jacket. For one of the splits that was at the back at the bottom, I used a slip stitch to close it up. The second was on a very visible part of the sleeve, but it was an atypically convenient spot. So for that one, I stitched on a very cute nautical-style ready-made patch that's been in my stash for years. I honestly think that now it looks better than it did before. I've also been darning up some of the many holes and worn patches on my self-made mittens and doing the same for my son's mum-made mittens. I'd let one of the holes in my son's mitten get so big that darning it wasn't even an option. So I had to make a patch using some firm like Ponte Roma fabric to stitch over it instead. Digging through my mending box, I've also found that there was some stuff that simply needed an iron, like a pair of shorts that I'd made out of my son's joggers that had got too small and damaged to try keeping them in jogger form. I also found some unwanted garments and some fabric that belonged elsewhere, so it's generally looking a lot less intimidating. Sustainability-wise, I've continued to meal plan and shop carefully, and I'm still getting my organic fruit and veg box delivered each week, which I love because it contains almost zero plastic packaging, and the variety means that we're always forced to mix up our diet. Okay, I actually have a sustainability fail/confession as well. So there's something that I've been meaning to do for months that I've failed to do, and I guess I need to use you lovely listeners as accountability. So we live in quite an old house. It's probably over 120 years old. It's pretty poorly insulated and fairly energy inefficient. And we're currently going through our first full winter here, so we're experiencing it in full. Largely, there's not a lot that we can do about it, but there is one thing we definitely can do, and that relates to the drafty front door. So I think the issue is caused by having a straight rectangular door in a wonky door frame. And when you're inside, you can literally see daylight round the door in some places. It's not as simple as sticking some of that insulation tape on the frame. I tried that and I couldn't then close the front door. I've been doing a bunch of research and visited a DIY shop, but I think I've come to the conclusion that the issue is too big for me to tackle and I need to call in someone more professional. But that's as far as I've got. The hall is super drafty and I know that we're wasting the heat that comes out of the nearby radiator. Plus we're going through a time when fuel bills are astronomically high and set to rise further. So I'm hopefully going to report back with some progress on the situation soon. This week I have the pleasure of saying 4 enormous thank yous to the podcast's newest patrons. They are Kate, Denise, another Kate and Vicky. Thank you so much. So actually, I'd like to explain a little bit more about how I use the Patreon app and why. So Patreon is an app that helps content creators of various types, including artists, musicians, writers and podcasters, get support for their work. There is the option for creators to set tiers for their supporters that equate to different values of money. The supporters then sign up to whichever tier they'd prefer or can afford to contribute, and the different tiers then will receive different benefits, sometimes exclusive content or offers, additional resources or discounts. So I decided for Check Your Thread that I didn't want to set any tiers, so I used the basic version, which means that supporters can sign up to contribute any amount that they wish or feel they're able to. So this is because I want everybody to be able to access the podcast regardless of the amount of disposable income available to them. I would feel uncomfortable producing additional audio content that could only be accessed by those with sufficient funds, you know. Therefore, when you sign up as a supporter via Patreon, you don't get anything that regular listeners to the podcast can't access. However, please know that by signing up, you are helping to keep the podcast going for everybody to enjoy. I hope further down the road to have some stuff to send out to patrons as a treat. But know that it's not a given when you sign up, and it's unlikely to be audio, as I'd really like to keep the podcast accessible to everybody regardless of income. Okay, apologies for the extra long intro today. Let's finally get on to the subject of this episode. So excitingly, today's episode has a different format and approach to previous episodes. Hopefully you'll like it. It's not a one-on-one conversation, but neither is it a solo episode. Instead, this episode is comprised of audio recorded throughout the day as myself and friend of the podcast Julia Hincks attended a rag rugging workshop. So you will hopefully remember Julia from episode 9. She's the sewing expert, teacher and author who shared heaps of tips and tricks relating to overlockers and cover stitch machines. She is also my friend and colleague and happens to live around the corner from me. So a lot of you really enjoyed episode 18 of the podcast that featured a conversation I had with rag rugging teacher and author Elspeth Jackson. When we recorded that conversation, Elspeth was on holiday in Spain, but most of the time it turns out she lives in Brighton, which is just a few miles from my home. After we made that episode, Elspeth kindly offered up a couple of spots on one of her in-person rag rugging workshops so I could try it out for myself. Which is great because without that nudge, rag rugging might very well have ended up on my things I'd like to try but probably will never get around to list. Elspeth was also kind enough to let me share some of her tips for anyone else who felt curious after listening to episode 18. As you'll hear, I was very excited to find out if rag rugging could be the answer to a scrapbuster's dreams. This episode includes some audio from the workshop where Elspeth explains the differences between practical and decorative rag rugging projects and how to pick fabrics accordingly. Plus, she gives more general advice on how your unwanted fabrics and leftovers can be used for this craft. Throughout the course of this day-long workshop, she obviously went into much more detail and shared so much more of what she's learnt over her many years of rag rugging. But the parts I've included should hopefully give you some ideas of what's possible. If you'd like to learn more or fancy having a go yourself, I've stuck all the links to Elspeth's website, Ragged Life, her books, YouTube channel, her classes, which can be taken both online and in person, in the show notes. Plus, you'll find pictures of the tools we use, our in-progress projects, and Julia and myself in action. Let me know what you think of this different format and if it's something you'd like to hear more of. Okay, enjoy! Right, so it's Sunday morning. It's about 9 o'clock. I'm getting ready to go meet Julia to head to the rag rugging workshop. I'm very excited. I've got 2 bags of fabric that I've prepped yesterday to take with me. In there I've got... See, I don't really know exactly what I need. Elspeth suggested that we bring soft fabric, so I'm not too sure if that means woven or knits. So I've kind of brought a selection. I've brought some garments that don't really have any use. So I've got, for example, a pair of pyjama bottoms that were my son's, and the fabric's got so thin that it's not really worth kind of fixing them to pass on to another child. I've got similarly a pair of jogging bottoms that are my daughter's that are too stained and too kind of destroyed in various places to bother fixing up to pass on. I've got some trousers that I made years ago out of some sateen that had some stretch, but they kind of always go a bit baggy during the first wear, so I've got that to use. It's quite fine, that fabric. I've also got some various scraps and leftovers from previous projects. I've got a mixture of wovens and knits. I've got some pontel. I've got a bit of gingham cotton there. I've got some cotton jersey. In terms of colours, I've literally just not really thought about it. I've just grabbed what I've got. Yeah, so I'm excited to have an experiment, see what's going to work best. I'm going to go and have some fun. Right, just checking my lateral flow. And I, according to this lateral flow test, do not have COVID. Okay, mask present. Let's go meet Julia.
Welcome to my little car.
Thank you, Julia Hincks, friend of the podcast.
You're most welcome.
So we are in your lovely little car and we are heading towards the rag rugging workshop. How are you feeling about that?
I'm quite excited about it. I haven't been out to a workshop where I actually get to not teach for,
Yeah.
I don't know how long actually.
Oh, sweetie.
Child in the road.
Child in the road. She's safe, don't worry, listeners.
It's all good, yeah.
I was going to say, because you
exciting.
teach a billion classes
God.
regularly.
Yes.
So it's quite exciting then to be. I mean, I'm kind of similar in that I haven't been to a workshop that I haven't been teaching for literally can't think when.
I can't remember the last one I did. I think I did a jacket making workshop, but years and years ago. So this is like a new thing. Like I've never done. I don't think I've ever done rag rugging.
No, I definitely haven't.
So this is like totally new to me.
Yeah. What do you think? What are your thoughts? Do you think it's going to be easy, hard?
I think. Well, I don't know. I mean, I'm quite a crafty person. I've tried a lot of crafts.
True, because you also knit and crochet as well as sew,
hoping
don't you?
I've got the dexterity.
Yeah. I'm excited to learn a new kind of sewing adjacent skill.
Yes, I'm looking forward to something which could potentially use up my fabric scraps.
Yes.
And maybe wool scraps and all of that.
Yeah,
kind of stuff.
I'm sure there's probably ways that you could get yarn in there as well.
I reckon this could be the answer.
This could be the answer. I'm desperately hoping that this is an answer, if not the answer, because I guess there's a kind of limit to how many rag rugs you need.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed yesterday going through my fabric scraps.
You come prepared.
Yeah, well, please use mine. No, it was really pleasing because it's just all this stuff that it feels like a burden, doesn't it? You know, it's got some use, but the volume of, the speed of which it accumulates is faster than you can kind of find uses for, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I just think, I think rag rugging could potentially use up the tiny bits that you can't usually find. What do you do with that? You stuff things with it, but like, how many things do you need to stuff? Yeah, completely. On a regular basis.
Completely. Yeah. So I've got that. I've also got some garments. Like clothes that my kids have had. The fabric is just wrecked, and there's no point. Yeah.
I guess all garments have like a shelf life. Eventually, they, you have to put them to rest.
Yeah, and I think that I'm not convinced that the garments that I've got are, necessarily like biodegradable, or at least not entirely biodegradable. So it's not something I would feel confident in. Eventually knowing one day that goes to landfill and it's going to be okay.
Yeah. So. Okay. Have you got like a colour palette, or was that a step too far?
That felt like a step too far, and I was a bit worried about that. So then I did an online search that's of rag rugging, because I was like, is my random selection going to look bonkers?
Right.
And I think the ones that have the colours like in strips, it makes like a stripe pattern. Doesn't matter how many colours you've got, they look cool.
Okay.
In my opinion.
Right.
So I know that we're going to learn, I believe we're going to learn 2 techniques today of 2 different traditional rag rugging techniques used in Britain.
Okay.
I'm sure other places in the world, but traditionally British rag rugging techniques. So we're going to learn 2, and then I guess we choose one of them and have a go. So I think there's one where it's kind of a bit more woven in, and then there's the one that's a bit more raggy. Do you know what I mean? Like a bit more bitty and floofy.
Bitty and floofy. Yeah.
That you can see the kind of the ends more, and there's the other one. I think the ends are kind of more woven in.
Okay, yeah, I'm with you now.
But I really could do with, need is a strong word, but I could really do with a rug by my front door, because our hallway gets filthy. We have no mat or rug or anything by our front door.
Yeah.
So I genuinely do have a need.
You need a rug.
So it's not like I'm making something for the sake of it,
Yeah, I haven't really thought this through. Like, I have no scraps.
You haven't had time to think it through.
I haven't had time to think it through. I've been just teaching and working, and then I just thought, okay, well, I'll just come and then feel inspired and go home.
Well, that's it. It's just collecting the technique, and then what you choose to do with that or not, that doesn't really matter today as such, does it? I'm heavily invested in this working out.
So basically, rag rugging, very thrifty way of making rag rugs. Oh, you've spilt your and you're wearing cream.
It's the first I'm wearing it as well.
Oh,
it's inevitable.
Do you want some water?
I've got some, thank you.
Oh, okay.
Nightmare.
So we're learning traditional British styles of rag rugging, so on a Hessian base, but you may come across other forms of rag rugs that are woven, stitched together, all of the above. So basically, we're going to be attacking some fabric. after we've learned what the tools are, and we're going to be learning how you would break down these items that are not like a beautiful fat quarter square. There's stuff that are maybe scraps from other craft projects. I don't know whether anyone here does patchworking or quilting or any kind of thing like that. You probably have all these oddments that aren't really fit for other things, but rag rugging is great because we can use up really small scraps if we want to. It's like good news. But they're all like weird shapes, so we need to learn how we deal with things and how we deal with different types of fabric as well, because in rag rugging, the good news is we can work with so many different things, and the weight of the fabric doesn't matter as much as it does, and even the quality of the fabric doesn't matter quite so much as it does with kind of perhaps other sewing crafts.
Yeah. So was rag rugging traditionally used for kind of when garments are just too, so worn that it's not worth kind of passing on?
Yeah, exactly. So it was primarily here in the UK, it kind of came up in the Victorian times. It was after, like, the mechanisation of fabric production. Sure. So basically it was like, beforehand, all fabric had to be kind of handmade and hand-woven together. So it was very expensive and things like that. As soon as you started getting mass production of fabric, you started getting more bits that were kind of left over and that maybe weren't such good quality, didn't last as long, and it was all about using up those things that were left over. So traditionally, the old historic rag rugs, if anyone comes across them in like a Victorian schools museum or something like that, they tend to be really dark, like dark materials, because that's what you had. You had the like woolen trousers, heavy coats, and they tended to be dark materials, whereas now we're spoilt for choice. Yeah. Because can you imagine how much pattern, how much colour, how many different like synthetic fabrics and everything we've got available to us. But traditionally, old British rag rugs, woolen materials, because that's what they had, first of all. And actually that was really good, because you used to be able to even compost your old rag rug and throw it on the compost heap, because it would completely biodegrade down. I don't even know what would happen if I put some of my rag rugs on the compost heap, because they've got all these kind of like polyesters and things. But it doesn't matter, it's still good for the environment, because we're using up things that we would otherwise perhaps be just chucking away, and we're saving them from going into things like landfill. So, and just one quick aside as well, a nice thing about rag rugging is the fact that you can use fabrics and clothing that has meaning to you. But basically, you can still recognise those fabrics in a rag rug, so it's a way of keeping certain fabrics and clothing in your home without having them like in the attic in a kind of, a box or in a drawer, particularly like children's clothing and stuff like that. Anything is pretty much fair game.
I guess people have done that with patchwork quilts, haven't they? And I always think that's such a lovely idea.
Yeah. It is
having the sort of children's clothing through time type thing. So.
Yeah, but I get maybe not all fabrics are suitable for patchwork. Maybe like jerseys and stuff. This would be a good way to use these. Yeah, we're hoping.
And some of those ones that are more difficult to sew with as well, like they're quite forgiving. Some of them with rag rugging. So. Okay, so getting back to what I was talking about, tools first, breaking down fabric, then 3 British techniques of rag rugging. The first one is the shaggy style of rag rugging, which is possibly the one that's more familiar to people.
It's what you think of, isn't it, when you think rag rugging?
Yeah, you think like nice, deep, thick pile, the kind of one you want to sink your feet into, basically. Confusingly, here in the UK, it's a very regional craft, rag rugging. So this particular technique is sometimes called different names. So you may have heard it referred to as proggy, proddy, clippy, peggy, cluty. And there are more names. So it's like cluty in Scotland. They're called peggy mats in the northeast, because they actually used to make them using the old wooden clothes pegs that they would file down to work with. Anyway, loads of different names for it. And there are different tools that you can use to do this style of rag rugging, but the ones that we're going to be working with today are the easiest ones, because let's make life as easy as possible. We're looking for a nice, mindful, easy craft that can get us through cold February.
Yeah, definitely.
So that's the one that we're going to be learning how to do first. You don't just need to make a rug, you can make whatever you want from it. So, even kind of, I make these like 3D rag rug bouquets and things like that. The third technique we're going to learn, confusingly I've gone from 1 to 3. The third one we're going to learn is the loopy style of rag rugging. This one is a slightly more modern. It's not modern, but it's slightly more modern than this traditional shaggy style. The loopy style is sometimes called hooked rag rugging or hooky rag rugging. And it gives you a much tighter, more closely knitted appearance. It's the kind of thing where if anyone's come on the workshop and they want to recreate things that are, dare I say it, artistic, you can recreate things that have quite a crisp design in this. If you try making a rug that has, I don't know, inspired by our scenery, a boat in the sea with the beach, if you do it in this technique, it will not look like a boat in the sea on the beach. It'll look like a blob in blue with like some, I don't know, thing. Yeah. Whereas if you do it in the loopy technique, you can really get a bit more design definition. Because you guys are a captive audience and you're stuck with me for the whole day, I'm also going to teach you a kind of hybrid between these two techniques. It's not one that officially exists. It's one that me and my mum have kind of invented. We call it short, shaggy rag rugging because we're not very inventive. And it kind of looks like a shorter version of this. But there's a bit more to it than that. And when we come onto each of the techniques, I'll give you a little bit of an insight into some of the pros and cons of each of them. But that one's a really nice one too. So basically, we're going to be practicing those 3 on this mini mat. And after that, I'm going to do a section on designing for rag rugs because there are certain things that work better, certain things that don't work so well. I'll be giving you all of my insights to do with fabric usage, colour usage, not fighting the natural properties of rag rugging. Who has got a hoard of stash of fabric that they need to use up? Yeah. A few of you have probably come because you've got stuff lying around that you've been hoarding for years that you want to use up. Rag rugging is the perfect craft for this because, as I was saying, pretty much any fabric goes, which is wonderful. You can mix together lots of different weights of fabric, and it's one of these crafts where actually mixing together different fabrics makes things look better rather than worse. And quality is not necessarily king in rag rugging. You can get a really, really bad quality Primark top, and it can rag rug up better than a Liberty print sometimes. So, it's great for using up small pieces too, because particularly with the shaggy technique, at full length, you can work with pieces that are as small as 9 by 1.5 centimetres, so really tiny bits. And even do things that are even smaller. So in my new book, I've got these mini wreaths, for example, which I decorate on the Christmas tree, and those are using pieces of fabric that are as small as 2 centimetres by 1 centimetre. So even really small things you can find a use. So basically, you probably want to know, what can I use, what can't I use? We divide projects up in rag rugging between decorative projects and practical projects. Practical projects are things like rugs and cushions, where on draft excluders, for example, where they're going to get a decent amount of wear, and you'll probably want to be able to wash them at some point. So you need to think a bit carefully about what you're going to use in those particular projects. And the one thing that I avoid for practical projects is fabrics that ravel. Raveling is the process of when you cut into a fabric, certain fabrics just fall to bits. Yes. And if you're walking on a rug, it just means that you're forever kind of
hoovering up around the rug.
Yeah, and particularly if you've got pets or anything, they're just going to be breathing in all this stuff. So you're trying to avoid those kind of fabrics where you can. In terms of decorative projects, literally anything goes. Because if you make a decorative wreath or a bouquet of flowers or, even a wall hanging, most of the time it's just going to sit there, look pretty, people aren't going to be touching it all the time, it's just going to look good and doesn't get the wear and tear that these practical projects do. So I use pretty much anything and everything in decorative projects. In terms of general rules of fabric, the general rule of thumb is certain fabrics are easier to work with than other fabrics. So fabrics that are easy are ones that are thin, soft, and not very textured, and they're pliable. Fabrics that are hard are thick, stiff and textured. So easy fabrics are things like jersey, cotton, lycra, fleece, anything that's soft and kind of cushy, even some kind of like knitted fabrics too. Hard fabrics are things that are like denim, leather, thick upholstery materials because they're very stiff and good quality. When I'm talking texture, anything with a rougher surface to it. So if something has stitching on it, for example, it makes it harder to pull through the hessian. Or things like lace, when you cut into it, it has jagged edges because of the holes in the lace, which makes it not pull through the hessian as smoothly. They're absolutely fine. You can work with them. They look great in a rag rug. They're just a bit harder to work with.
How's it going?
Pretty good, actually. I like that. I've picked something that I feel I can finish.
So, have you found some fabrics easier to use than others?
And then when you come here,
I'm finding them all okay. It's nice to pick out different textures because I'm making flowers.
Yeah.
And when we were doing the samples for the just like the rag rug samples, the ones that worked best for that were the jersey. But actually, for this, the jersey doesn't have enough like structure.
Yeah.
So I need something with more structure. So I was trying to pick things out that would not kind of just hang and fall flat.
Yeah.
So like these ones have got, I don't know what that is, some kind of
Cool.
gauzy fabric that's going to stay in its shape, basically.
Yeah.
But,
Nice. I love the way you've done the centre of the flowers, where you've kind of trimmed them shorter and narrower to make a little cute middle. Awesome. So,
how are you doing?
Okay, so far I'm using the loopy technique, and I'm using like a ponte.
Oh,
So-
what was this in its previous life?
Scrap
Just
of
scrap
ponte,
from the
yeah.
project.
So it's quite dense,
Sometimes it's 3 or 2,
but it's very soft. And it's okay. I'm looking forward to maybe finishing with this soon, and then maybe trying like a lightweight woven or something to see how that feels. But I like the springiness that this is bringing, and I think I've managed to nail the length of the loops quite well. I think they're fairly uniform.
Yeah,
So yeah, I'm just going to crack on.
good stuff.
Right, so quick correction, it wasn't 2 techniques we learned in the workshop, it was 3. So there was the shaggy technique, which is the very kind of floofy, fluffy, voluminous one. There was a kind of in-betweeny, which was the short shaggy.
Short shaggy technique.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then
the loopy.
The loopy, which is a
called
tighter.
loopy?
Yeah, which is the tighter kind of textural technique.
Yeah.
So I started making the loopy technique as a full-on, well, I'm not going to do a rug, I'm going to do a mat, so on the hessian back. So that's what I started, and then you chose to do the bouquet making with the...
I did. I've made the beginnings of 3 flowers.
which look beautiful.
Thank you very much.
The colours you've chosen are really gorgeous, and the textures and the sheen of the fabrics work really well. So, was it generally easier than you thought it was going to be, harder than you thought it was going to be?
Yeah, like I guess as easy and straightforward as I thought it was going to be.
But there was definitely like hints and tips that we picked up that I think may have tripped me up if I was trying to do it at home.
Yeah,
possibly.
I think so. Just like things which might be obvious, but like when you're planning what you're working on, to say start from the middle and work out, or start from one end and work in, rather than start in different areas, putting in colours and then trying to find the holes, because it's quite difficult to get to the hessian base if you've started in various areas, then you're trying to fill in space.
Yeah, I must admit, with my mat that I'm making, I'm a little bit nervous about, because at the moment I'm kind of holding it at the edge.
Yeah.
What's going to happen when I get deeper in, if that's... because I'm still kind of...
I guess you have to roll it. You just have to roll the edge over, and
I'll
then you
have
can
to
get to where, like you would do if you were doing...
possibly. I wonder if when it gets really
cross-stitch
chunky, though, if my hand won't go through. Well, that remains to be seen.
You might have to roll up from the other end and then hold it from the
from
bit
the
you
thinner
haven't worked
hessian
on yet.
side. Yeah, that's going to be cool. I'm very excited. I honestly do now feel, though, that I have got a new set of techniques
Yeah.
that will help me use up my scraps.
Exactly.
I mean, literally, I went with 2 bags of scraps and and garments, and I've offloaded them all. I brought a few back
that is pretty good
to get on with, and now I'm thinking about all those garments that I've been hoarding because I feel like they're not good enough to put in a charity shop because I don't think they've got resale value because they're quite worn. It's a new option, and I'm very excited about it. So
I feel like I could have / should have taken a lint roller with me because I feel like I'm covered in bits of lint. That's the only thing I guess about this. It's a lot of shedding fabrics. You have to be careful what you choose.
I look a complete state because I dropped my coffee down me the second we entered.
But the perfect outfit to be
my new
spilling coffee
cream
over yourself.
Greta dungarees, ideal.
Oh,
but
Greta.
Yeah.
I don't think it's like a difficult thing to grasp. It's not like a difficult technique to try and...
Yeah, you could learn at home,
you know,
with a book or with some YouTube videos or something.
Yeah, it's not like kind of like complex knitting or crochet where you feel like you need someone to sort of go through it step by step right next to you and then do it again a million times before you pick it up.
Yeah, but I did feel like it's one of those things that I'd love to learn, and the fact that we had a class to attend did give me the kick up the bum to actually do it.
You've started now, so you've got to finish that project.
Yeah, and I'm a polder, so I will.
Exactly. You're going to do this.
Yeah. Scraps are going to be busted. Well, thank you, Julia. Thank you for coming along.
You're most welcome.
And thank you for
inviting me. Thank you for coming out in my little car. It's been a nice little trip up the seafront.
It's been great. It's been wonderful. And maybe Zoe and Julia go and do things should be...
I think it should be a regular thing.
Feature of the podcast.
Where can we go next?
I don't know. We'll think about it. Thanks so much for listening. I really hope you enjoyed this episode and are left feeling inspired. For more info about the podcast, including show notes for this and every episode, head to checkyourthread.com. I'd love to hear from you, so if you have any comments, questions or ideas for future episodes, please get in touch by emailing zoe@checkyourthread.com or find me on Instagram @checkyourthread. Massive thanks to Patrick Potter for production support, to Sylvia Seller for the awesome logo design, and to Simon at Palm Skin Productions for the music. This ad-free podcast would not be possible without listener support, so if you feel you are able, please consider signing up to the Check Your Thread Patreon. For the equivalent of buying me a coffee each month, you'll be making it possible to continue producing regular episodes. Links can be found in the show notes and on the website checkyourthread.com. I hope you'll listen again next week. Until then, take care. Bye!